scheduled to take the test on the 29th of this month.
Awesome.
Sweet. Well, thank y'all for joining us this morning. I didn't particularly have a topic for today, and then over the weekend, one of our teammates had an issue on the buy side with sellers not moving out and not following timeline and guidance and having any kind of urgency with getting out of their property that was no longer theirs. So I thought we might talk about final walkthrough, our roles in that on both sides of the transaction, best practices for that, things that we need to make sure that we're always doing. To me, a lot of the sellers right now are in crisis mode. They're selling because they have to, not because they want to, which takes up a lot of emotional bandwidth and probably is wearing y'all the heck out. Having to navigate that, wearing your counselor hat and therapist hat and all the things. So I shared a YouTube video link of an attorney that has a whole video series on different steps in the transaction, which can be helpful for going into those things, and just some reminders, even if y'all been in this business for a long time. Sometimes it's great just to get a refresher to go over steps in the process that we might otherwise forget or not have front of mind. So I would love everybody's input on scheduling final walkthrough. One of the YouTube videos I watched yesterday too said, depending on the situation and the home, you can even bring in an inspector to check things. You can bring in like a lamp to plug in to make sure all the electrical outlets are working. There's all kinds of things we can do. But Richard and Tracy, could you offer a little insight on how y'all work y'all's final walkthroughs and any tips or tricks or problems, hurdles y'all have helped overcome from that critical point of final walkthrough to the closing table?
I like to two things. I like to do the final walkthrough as late as possible, as close to closing as possible. And I understand that maybe in the situation that happened this weekend, that probably would have helped to do a walkthrough sooner, but that's where, the real kind of granular checklists come in that Stacy helps with, that have, hey, where will the keys to the community mailbox be? Where are we going to leave the remotes for the garage, for the entry gate, for the subdivision? All those things you can kind of drip on the listing agent in the days coming up to closing. Basically serve as a reminder, you need to be packing your stuff and getting out of there, and have, the owner's manuals in this drawer and the keys and the remotes on the counter, and information about the community clubhouse and access cards with them as well. So I think having a kind of a constant drip on the other side of the transaction as a reminder in the days coming up to closing is super helpful. And then that way, if the agent's non-responsive, you might need to up the volume a little bit, or maybe get their broker involved if that's necessary. But that's kind of, Tracy and I were just talking about this yesterday, about a walkthrough for our daughter who's closing on a house up in Kerrville, and whether or not to do it on the 26th when the closing's it's like on the 29th?
It's on the 30th.
On the 30th? I'm like, no, you want to do it right up at the last minute to make sure there's not anything missing, any squatters. I mean, that's what the title company always says, that they, here's this disclosure that says we haven't inspected the property, so we don't know if there's any squatters in there, what the property condition is. That's up to us to help our clients clarify that. So anyway, my 2 cents.
Well, and
okay, sorry. I also like to look over the repair amendment. And sometimes if there's a lot of stuff, I'll bring it just to make sure, to put our eyes on everything. Hopefully they've provided receipts and done all those things, but you never know.
So Richmond, let's say that you're pushing it till sort of like the last minute and there's items that haven't been checked for the repairs amendment and things like that. How do you navigate that when you're close to the closing time.
How about a real life story? Non-realty items addendum said that they would include the refrigerator, and closings at 11, our walkthroughs at 9. We get there and there's not a refrigerator. And I'm representing the buyers. The other agent was able to get a refrigerator purchased and delivered by 10:30. And this was like 15 miles northwest of Fredericksburg out in the boondocks. So that was a miracle, but you just got to work with, you just got to make it happen. And we were prepared to delay closing. I mean, it really kind of made my buyers mad. I tried to smooth it over like, hey, we'll work it out. And I mean, they were up in arms. So I communicated that to the other side, and over a refrigerator on a second home in the country out in Gillespie County. So, I mean,
How the heck the agent pulled a
Yeah,
refrigerator out of the air?
it was, yeah, she did a good job. I'm still impressed with her for that. But you know, that's the other part of this. If you've got a non-responsive agent on the other end, it makes it super difficult. So that's where your title company, and maybe if there's your title company needs to come in and help drip on them about deadlines and things that need to be taken care of. But yeah, that's every closing is different. Every transaction is different for sure.
So let's say we go to do a final walkthrough and there's bags of trash and things aren't moving. And what is our role on the buy side to light a fire? Like, do you suggest email? Do you suggest taking videos and sending them to their agent? What do y'all do on that kind of situation?
Absolutely. That's what we do. And we delay closing if necessary. And sometimes, you know, sometimes our buyers have the moving van packed, right? They don't have anywhere to live until this thing closes. And it, you know, you might wrangle a 1 or 2 night hotel stay out of the other side or something, but you've got to get the property in a condition to be occupied where the buyers are comfortable in closing on it.
I had a seller, and he had left, and I went to go check the house, and this was just a day or two before closing. He'd left food in the fridge, trash on the floor, like it was in terrible shape. And I called him and I said, dude, you can't leave a house like that. I said, I'm going to order some house cleaners and you're going to pay for them. And he was like, oh, okay. So sometimes you have to, I call it getting out my nurse ratchet. Sometimes you have to get her out. And
Well, I
tell
don't think they're
people-
understanding it from the other side. You know, like if you were the one buying the house, would you want to walk into your new home? You just took a mortgage out on and everything to walk into that kind of disaster. Like,
yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah, and you know, I've hauled stuff off too, you know, like, oh, hey, this was supposed to be hauled off. I'm like, well, let me get my truck. I've helped somebody clean a swimming pool. I mean, it's just, we do what we have to do in those. If there's a date and a time on the calendar and it's possible with a little bit of extra elbow grease to make it happen, sometimes we have to roll up our sleeves and get in there and get dirty and get it done. So it's part of the glamorous side of real estate that so many people don't appreciate.
Johnny goes and cleans up mouse poop on those abandoned houses out in the Alpine.
Krista, I think I saw you just join. Caitlin, can y'all share any stories that y'all have had that we could learn from on final walkthroughs and ways we can navigate it if things aren't progressing in a timely fashion for
I have
closing?
a recent one actually, and I'm still not sure that there's a perfect way to handle this, but open to all thoughts on this. So on one, I just helped a buyer purchase here in Granbury. We closed a few weeks ago. We walk in, the agent was the seller too, so she was just a little difficult because her entire recourse the entire time was like, look, I get it. Like, I'm an agent, whatever. Like, I'm trying to do my best here. You know, they were remodeling another house. So stuff was just kind of slow from their end and repairs and all. And we did ask for, I mean, asked for a decent amount of repairs, but it was all things that could be completed by like the same two contractors and just a bunch of littler items, some electrical stuff, whatever. But we walk in for final walkthrough. Actually, the day of closing, we walked in that morning. We were closing that afternoon at like 4 o'clock. It's like 10 a.m. And where the couch was sitting, it has wood floors. Where the couch was sitting when we were there prior, and now it's empty, there were like huge divots and like major damage to the wood floor that we did not see before. And their couch was in kind of a weird spot. My buyer's like, what's that? Like, we didn't know that was there. I'm like, you're right. We did not know that was there. And I wouldn't have thought to move the couch and look. But I mean, it was huge damage, and it's not somewhere my buyer is going to put a couch. They had a weird couch in there. And then in the garage, there was like a hole in the wall, but there had been so much stuff in the garage prior. And I was like, hey, did that happen? You know, while y'all are moving stuff out or whatever. And they're like, no, that was already there. Y'all just didn't see it. And I'm like, there's no way I would have really seen that unless I moved a bunch of stuff out of your garage. But there were just some things like that we didn't find until the day of closing. So my buyer wasn't super happy. And then, I mean, they weren't mad at me because they were like, look, none of us would have thought to move that. But just handling that was it was uncomfortable because I feel bad. Like, I want them to be excited about moving into that house. And then, we had requested that the house be professionally cleaned. Well, they had that done, and then they had a bunch of the repair work done. So contractors had been in and out of the house, and so it really wasn't clean anymore. And they were like, well, we tried to re-clean it the best we could. And my buyer's literally looking around in the corner. We're finding all like just sawdust and all kinds of stuff. And so it was disappointing. Honestly, I wish that the seller would have handled it better. Her cop out was just like, I'm busy and whatever. And so I don't know, but that kind of put me in a bad spot and made me look bad. So I didn't love that.
Did they disclose the fact that that floor was damaged? Because isn't that in the disclosure? Flooring, do you know of any flooring damage?
There was nothing in the disclosure, no. And there was a section of it we had been able to see that was out there was like two spots that there was some damage. There was a small little piece of it that we saw and we knew was there, but then they moved that couch and there was like probably a 3x3 area of like major damage that they're having fixed actually. But no, there was nothing in the disclosure.
I was gonna say, well, those sellers can be held responsible for that then, because they hid it and they knew about it because they hid it and they didn't disclose it.
Right. Well, when I said something to her, she was like, well, it's not, it's functional. Like, it's fine. It's cosmetic. So you should have, you should be fine with that. Like, it should be fine. And I was like, well, that's not really the point. That's major damage to an expensive floor that's not super easy to fix. So
Yeah, no ethics there.
no, it was disappointing. I was very disappointed. My buyer she looked around and was like, actually, I hate this flooring, so I'm going to have the whole thing replaced anyways. So it kind of was like, whatever, but, it didn't make me look great. It wasn't super fun. And it's just hard when there's things that like we may or may not see. A hole in the wall in the garage, is that really a huge deal? Maybe, maybe not, but it's disappointing. Like, and they're like, well, that was hidden. There was a bunch of boxes there. It was there before. I'm like, there's no way we would have seen that. They literally had so much stuff in that garage. It was insane.
No, I'm sorry. No, that's rough.
You almost
Well,
wonder if it's intentional for these like steps to hide it.
Kind of is what it is. But if anybody has any thoughts about how to handle stuff like that better, because it happens all the time, especially on these houses that have had a couple of owners, I mean, sometimes there's just things that nobody catches until the day of closing when it's empty and cleaned out.
Well, I will tell you, I have done sheetrock repair on a house for clients.
Is that another one of your hidden skills that we didn't know about?
It is. It's another one of my hidden skills.
Awesome.
And it looked really nice. So
That's awesome. So let's say worst case scenario that we do find a walkthrough, we see people there making progress, we go ahead and sign off on the walkthrough, we go to closing, and then we go to the buyers are out of town and we go to inspect it before our buyers come in and there's still people living there. How do y'all handle that? I reached out to Matt, our law enforcement agent, for backup on that because I wasn't really sure how that goes. Have any of y'all had that problem before where after closing you still have sellers in a home that's no longer theirs after it's funded?
I have not ever had that situation, but I would be interested to hear everybody's
Yeah.
thoughts on how to handle that.
Well, I mean, so was it like a surprise they were there after closing?
Yes. Yes. And they were still moving after closing, after funding. So Matt, are you still on the call?
I sure am.
Sweet. Do you want to just kind of talk through if that ever happens, like law enforcement wise, how our local law enforcement can help through that process?
Yeah, so law enforcement wise, what it actually becomes is a civil issue. So if they're still there and it has to do with the contract and everything, they're not criminally trespassing, right? Even though it's a residence, they were supposed to move out per contract and they didn't. So what you need to do is contact the local justice of the peace for that jurisdiction and the constable's office, get them involved so they can start an eviction process if necessary. I would say the first step is to contact the agent. You contact that listing agent, let them know, hey, your sellers are still in the house. Why, for one, and then two, if they're still here, what is their plan? You know, are they needing some extra time? What is the deal? They were supposed to be out before closing. And then if you get pushback on that, then contact the JP and the constable's office to start the eviction process. And then after that, it's kind of like a waiting game. You've got to get, I think nowadays you have to get the JP to sign off on it. And then once he does, then the constable can go over there and serve him with it. And then it's a process. They have to give him I think 3 days notice. And then after my wife will know more about this because she's in property management, but and then they'll have so many days to get out. And once they're not out, then I think the JP can order a writ of possession, and then the constable can go in there, serve that writ of possession, remove everything from inside the house, put it out at the curb, and that's it.
Yeah, we hope
You
it
know,
never comes to that.
I don't see Kyle on here, but he's got some experience with a temporary lease that ended up in court with what Matt is describing happening, where the Kyle represented the seller. The buyer went in and did probably $200,000 worth of updates to the house, and I think Kyle just closed that out and has that property under contract. They were able to get rid of that lessee who had done the improvements because he just flat refused to close. It was sort of a hostile standoff in that case.
Yeah, I know, Coach. That was the day we were in Fredericksburg on the tour, and Marty came to the tour, and Coach was in court. And lease backs always make me nervous for that reason, because you just never know. We sign those types of things always in good faith, hoping that things are going to work out and move forward as they say. But now you're in somebody else's home, and that exact thing can happen really in any kind of early it's not really a lease back because they're in it before closing, but that was awful that they had to go through that because it was almost a year. It was before they joined the brokerage that happened. So it's been going through the courts for a long time. So I know his seller's very relieved. And those rascals are in Cancun, so they're probably not on the call this morning. We should go join them. thanks, Matt, for that kind of play by play on that. Hopefully we never have to go through that, but just
Yeah.
so you know, there is, procedural things we have to do. And obviously then the meter's running on expenses and junk calling off companies and all kinds of things like that as well. We do have a couple of checklists that I'll share out to our group just as a refresher that are in our drive on final walkthroughs. There's a YouTube video that I'll also share just about how to handle that. I think a lot of y'all have had a lot of listings lately, but not as many buyers. Hopefully that will shift and we'll get back to filling our pipeline with buyers. But just something to think about, scheduling, like Richmond said, scheduling that final walkthrough so that we can see it in almost the same condition without having like a couple of days of delays prior to closing is important. And then taking your camera, taking your phone with you always to document anything that you see there and then conveying that back. And your closing, your title company has language in there regarding the final walkthrough that you sign off on. And then they also have a section about for the sellers that this home is a non-hazardous home and it hasn't had any damage since the final walkthrough. So always get familiar with that language. I think every title company on that is a little bit different for what their language looks like, that they have the sellers sign off on there. Documentation is everything. In some situations, I like emails more than phone calls, just so that way you can cross your T's and dot your I's on any of that stuff too, to always CYA on that stuff. Does anybody else have any crazy scenarios regarding final walkthroughs and closings that we can all learn from?
I don't have a scenario, but I've got a recommendation. I mean, you can do a walkthrough. So say maybe like 2 to 3 days before closing. And you don't have to say, oh, it's for our final walkthrough. Like, oh, they want to get some final measurements or something. But you go in there, you make some documentation, take some photos, and then again, do your final walkthrough, ideally the day of closing. So you can do a couple of them. You can schedule those showings, but yeah, just document, because if it comes down to it and, say they did do some damage and they can come back and say, oh, we didn't do that, it was already like that. Well, then you've got a timestamp photo that shows, no, look, we came in here before closing and then the damage was done and it wasn't here like 3 days before. So.
Good point on that. Anybody else have any scenarios, crazy stories, dumpster fires, anything you want to share regarding that?
I have a story real quick. This was years ago at a different brokerage, and it didn't happen to me. It was another agent in our shop, but they went to do a final walkthrough, and the sellers were getting a divorce. And the night before closing, the husband went in and opened up cans of paint and just slung them all over the house because he was really mad at her. So,
Wow.
yeah. So needless to say, they did not close. I don't know exactly what the resolution was to that, but that's always kind of a simple story to share with a buyer on why you always want to do a walkthrough. Just kind of a short story that, I think some people relate to. But anyway, yeah, he ruined the entire house. So.
Wow. Yeah, I'm just visiting with you guys. Seems like quite a few of our sellers are in similar situations where it's like a hostile. One of the parties involved in the sale doesn't want to sell. So it's very emotional, clearly, right? If you're going to destroy your home. It's easy to see on those situations too, why maybe they're getting divorced if that's who you are as a person.
Exactly.
Well, thank y'all so much. This will definitely be an ongoing conversation. And anytime y'all have scenarios that you're navigating, share, because it's all an opportunity for us to learn and grow together and figure out ways to, always lead with professionalism and to also get the job done timely and efficiently for our clients. We're really excited to spend time with you guys on Thursday for our summit in Clay Shoot. I sent an email out yesterday on that. And then if you want to volunteer for the Wild Game Dinner on Saturday and you haven't, reach out to Jessica and we'll get you on the list for that as well. We're working the bar, so it'll be a fun time to interact with people and just make connections and give back to our community.
Hey, Lisa, on the Wild Game Dinner, we need to get those names really soon. And we are having to add exact names of who's volunteering and when to the volunteer list, and those people will, anybody that volunteers will get a free pass to get into Wild Game Dinner. But I have to turn that in like today, this morning, those names. So if you're considering volunteering and you have not let us know, please do sooner than later.
Awesome. Well, y'all have a great day, and we will see you guys Thursday at the Wild Game Dinner at Joshua Creek Ranch. Hope y'all have a good one.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank y'all.